Welcome to Drink with James, episode 63, featuring our good friends from, wait, like I get the bottle in the right place.
Yes.
Veuve Clicquot. Drink with James, episode 63, very special guest. We're at the end of the show, so I'm drunk. Sydney Fazende, like Shazam, is here with us. Is that right? Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Fazende?
Yeah, just go Fazende. Yeah,
Sydney's here. Sydney, who works at LaForce, she manages the Veuve Clicquot account. She is going to drop all of the knowledge about Veuve Clicquot, how to pronounce it, how to work with them, who's definitely not going to be able to work with them, what she loves, what she hates, how beautiful her hair is. All of this and more coming up in the next 45 minutes. We're going on a journey. Cheers. Okay, we try and be honest here and be no bullshit and be super transparent. You spoke at the conference and a lot, Tim did a whole survey after who was your favorite speaker. There was a lot of Sydney's in there.
Wow.
People really loved
That's
your
so
talk
kind.
and we're so happy you're here. How did you get into this world? I mean, I think, did you start out, you're relatively young. You're certainly younger than me, which is not that hard at these days. But did you start out like thinking you were going to work in social, or was this kind of just happen?
No clue.
Yeah.
No clue. I started my Twitter account when Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 came out. I was
Right.
sort of dramatic and also a big nerd, and I was
Right.
like, I need to fill this void. Like, there's no more
And
Harry Potter.
Twitter was going to do it
I
for
joined it to talk to people who were also experiencing the same loss as me.
What
And
happened
so,
in the Deathly Hallows? I can't remember.
Deathly Hallows?
Yeah, is
Where
that
he,
the last one?
Saved the world.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the last one?
It was the last one.
Okay.
It was the last one. Yeah, so it was part 2 of the movie. So basically I was
Right.
like, all right, this chapter of my life is closed.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. That was Twitter. I had no desire to have an Instagram actually, but I did have a desire to be in New York City. I was a PR major. I realized the importance of digital in PR campaigns, but I kind of spun that, in my intern interview, and I landed a social media internship. I was like, the sky fell down. I was like, no, I just want to write pitches,
I don't want to do this.
I didn't want to tweet. I didn't want to write Facebook posts, none of that. So my first day of my internship at LaForce, where I am now, I started my Instagram account. 3 days later, I was at, I think the 6th or 7th annual Veuve Clicquot Polo Classic event in New York, interning and moderating, user-generated content. We're on the cutting edge, right? But at that point, I fell in love with it pretty quickly because social media became a tool for storytelling, and that was also one of the reasons why I loved PR so much, was that ability to kind of tell a story creatively. And it changes, every 3 months. I mean, as you know, I feel like I'm relearning my job every 3 months, and that's awesome. And for someone who gets kind of bored easily and likes to be challenged, it's the best place to be.
Yeah, and you guys, I mean, obviously, so you take care of Veuve, which is obviously an incredible client, and really we hear all the time, just when you bring up who does social well, it's you guys are always in that conversation, and you're and you're a big part of that, which is incredible. I mean, how from being an intern 3 days after you started at the 6th one, and you guys just had your 10th one, right? So how much has it changed? What are some of the big things that have changed from that one, your first one, to the one you just did?
Well, way back then, I was taking the photos on my iPhone that you would then see on the Instagram. And now, we kind of assemble, I like to call them the Avengers. They're the best of GIF artistry, photography, street style photography, and videography to weave together kind of the tapestry of what that event is on our newsfeed. That's been a change. I think also just the way that we're engaging with influencers has changed a lot too. Back then, in the Stone Ages,
4 years ago.
Stone Ages of social media.
Yeah, it was.
I remember we were awarded 2 spots on a guest list of probably 500 for social media. Two bloggers. I think at that time, if I can be transparent,
Please,
I think it was Jamie Beck and and Kelly Framel.
Yeah.
You know, those were the two that
would make sense.
Met,
yeah, that makes
met
sense.
the criteria at that time. But now, you know, everyone's an influencer sort of like in their own way.
Right.
And we love to not only tell the story through the lens of Veuve Clicquot, but also through the lens of our event attendees.
Mm-hmm.
So we are tasking ourselves, you know, 6 months prior to an event to create a photo moment or an event experience that is so unique that, you know, when you arrive, you're itching, you know, to reach to your phone and take a picture. And whether you are sending that to your mom,
right.
you know, back in Texas, or sharing that to your, you know, your social media channels, that's a win for us.
Right. So quick question, and then I have another question about what you just said, but how many, you know, 2 spots for bloggers the first time, right now, how many do you think out of that same theoretical 500, how many do you think would be reserved for people who are there because of their following online?
Yeah. I think if you wanted to cut it out, kind of like in those delineations, I'd say half of that list. But then it's also kind of like a Venn diagram, because there's so much overlap.
Because it's like you're inviting celebrities, but maybe ones that you like their Instagram following.
Yeah. And part of what I think makes our team at LaForce, you know, for Veuve Clicquot so awesome is that we're fully integrated, like PR and social media. So I am maybe like the hashtag side of the operations. I'm working hand in hand with the publicists, and so as we're building these lists or ideas or event programs, we're doing it all together, and we're kind of just making everything that much stronger.
Right. So I think this is like just structurally for, you know, a lot of the influencers who watch the show are kind of on the up and up. And I think it would be interesting to hear from a brand perspective.
Sure.
You invite somebody, let's say it's their first year, they're not getting into the VIP tent yet, but they're in the Rose Garden or the Rose Garden?
Rose Garden.
The Rose Garden, that makes sense.
Rose Garden.
They're in the Rose Garden. What are you expecting from it? Like what do you kind of look at, like they went to the event and you're like, they did a great job. Like what is that thing you're looking for from an influencer? It's the first time working with you. How can they impress you?
That kind of success or like performance indicator can arrive in a couple of different ways. I think one of the more obvious things is we do look at, you know, your Instagram or your own maybe social coverage of the event. That's exciting for us to see. Even though we do curate a variety of different event experiences, it's important for us as a brand to be able to showcase them. You know, so we love seeing the world through those rosé, you know, colored glasses. If we want to get a little cheesy.
No, we can. Yeah, absolutely.
If we want to get a little cheesy there, but you know, we'll also receive some follow-up emails from guests, maybe first timers at the Veuve Clicquot Polo Classic, and we love that. You know, it's a thank you. It's also maybe I might have just posted one Instagram to my channels, but here are like the 15 images that I took that I'll either be putting to my blog, or here, you know, for you as a brand to just have and enjoy. You know, that like really speaks loudly to us, because, you know, content is king and it reigns supreme for us, and we're always just kind of like looking for, you know, those storytellers and those people who can tell our brand story, you know, on their own channels.
And what percentage of you know, just back of the napkin, like how many people do you think after they go to that are sending that email? Is it pretty common, or is it not as common as you'd like?
It's not so common, but it's very appreciated. You know, but those are the ones that shine through and that you really take notice of. You know, someone sends an email, they say thank you. Next thing you know, you're going out to coffee and figuring out like other ways we can collaborate. Maybe not for Veuve Clicquot, but maybe some of the other brands in our agency.
Totally.
You know, it all kind of like starts there with that dialogue.
Right, and that's a good point. I mean, you know, we see you in Fohr Cards so much as Veuve Clicquot, but you work at LaForce and you guys have incredible clients across the board. And I'm sure, you know, when you get a good influencer you've worked with, do you kind of evangelize that person throughout the agency and say, hey, this is, somebody comes up to you from another brand that they work on and say, hey, I need somebody? You're like, oh, this person's great. Like, how much of that is happening? It
happens a lot. It happens because, too, you know, LaForce, we have so many different teams who, you know, almost specialize in different categories. You know, my team is lifestyle and wine and spirits. There are other teams that specialize in fashion or beauty, and, you know, we're always talking together about, you know, who we've had good experiences with, you know, kind of in that digital sphere, but also, you know, kind of like sharing along recommendations where we see fit. You know, I have a client, for instance, that has a compound in Bali. You know, and if I'm talking to someone who has travel plans to visit Bali, you know, this summer, that's like an example of us kind of like sharing along that opportunity for this other brand to capitalize on.
That totally makes sense. Also, what is a compound? That sounds either amazing or terrible.
John Hardy jewelry.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing. Yes,
yeah.
Every piece of their jewelry is like hand woven by these artisans in Bali. It's so incredible.
Did Jamie shoot something for them?
Yes.
So.
Many moons ago. But yes, she did.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, you guys are now, I think I first came to know the brand, obviously, through the product, but social, through through the Polo Classic. But, I've almost been more impressed in recent years with things that you're doing outside of that. I think the first one was, I went to an event where you could send a bottle of Clicquot to anyone in the country. And there was there were these little mailboxes, and you'd send a little form out, and you ship the bottles to somebody for them. It was an interesting event, but then it was so much more than that event, because you then had content throughout the whole country, and you still kind of do that, where it's I don't know if that's a series y'all do, but where you're highlighting cities or different places.
We'll pop up.
Yeah.
We'll pop up.
You'll pop up, but maybe there's a little event going on, but sometimes it seems like it's just you working with somebody interesting in those spaces, right? So explain kind of how that came about.
I think that's an example of kind of that brand to agency relationship. So our brand team is sitting there and trying to create excitement, about a champagne who maybe doesn't have a new vintage coming out every year, So that's where we all get creative together to find different ways to make the brand exciting and interesting and fun, and engage with our consumers. So their idea being this roadmap, right, of cities where they're going to have events and programs. That's when we, as the PR and social media agency, come in there and weave in these underlying layers of digital or social media or public relations legs. So for digital perspective, we maybe can't talk about all the events at once or in real time, but what we can do is align with someone who maybe has a little bit more local flavor and can tell the story of New Orleans through their own lens. That's really important to us as a brand, is to kind of be told through the eyes of, the Veuve Clicquot consumer or enjoyer or, occasional drinker. We want to not just be the ringleader, but we also want to be alongside everyone else who's enjoying our champagne.
And those projects were really interesting because when you went out, it felt like a different kind of person that you were working with. There were some more up and coming influencers because the locations were kind of more niche sometimes. It seemed much more focused on, whereas the Polo Classics, a lot of the big style bloggers are there, and it's a very fashion. It is the fashion event in the summer, I'd say, for New York City.
Yes.
But this was much more photography driven.
Yes.
So did you have to, obviously you guys have been a client of Fohr for quite some time, which is we're very thankful for, and hopefully you use Fohr a bit, but to kind of build this program. But how did that change the way you were looking at influencers and looking to figure out who you were going to work with? Because it's one thing to be oh yeah, Jamie Beck, Kelly, they totally make sense, but now I need a photographer in Tennessee.
It was so interesting. That program actually really kind of changed the game for us on social media. I think that was really a turning point for us in kind of building our community and audience, because prior to that point, we really had events concentrated in New York and Los Angeles, the media hubs. When we took that model and applied it to 26 cities around the United States, we did have to find people in, a Detroit, Michigan, or, a Dallas, Texas, that we wouldn't have had the opportunity to work with previously.
Right.
That was awesome and so rewarding in so many different ways. But in terms of finding those folks, yes, Fohr is an excellent, excellent tool. But we also just kind of took to Instagram and used it almost as like a model search. We joke in the office that it's America's Next Top Model because you can always find somebody, whether it's via the geotags or this, that, and the other. What we were looking for, in aligning with that partner, it was content. Content reigned supreme. It wasn't just how many followers you had. It was whether, your style, was not totally Veuve Clicquot, but like-minded. And it was also kind of that balance of lifestyle. We didn't want just fashion. We also wanted someone who would have, mimosas or champagne at brunch.
Right.
So that kind of like organic tie was very important for us also.
Can you share a bit, like, as much as you can? It's interesting because I think this comes up in pitches all the time when we're talking to brands and when we're building campaigns, and it's just like, yeah, they don't like, yeah, does that person feel Vav? And how do you apply that? Because I think, we always talk to influencers and say that, like, you really have to know yourself, like, and know
Exactly.
the kinds of brands that you would make sense for.
Yes.
So, like, what are some of just the easy things to understand that, like, would disqualify someone or qualify them to work with you guys?
I think one of the more obvious tells, if you will, for Veuve Clicquot is kind of having that more lifestyle bent to your photography. If you are on the cobblestone streets of New York every day shooting outfit of the day posts, amazing. But if you're not occasionally giving insight into that, happy hour moment or entertaining idea, we don't really see the connect or the fit. As much as we are building relationships, like as a brand, and we love you whether you post about us or not, that is the ultimate goal, kind of from a content marketing perspective, is to sort of like earn, our placement in your news feeds. I think JC Dupree is actually an excellent example of this. She will email us when she's having like a girls' night and wants to, serve rosé or something like that. And we'll sit there and, we'll provide some champagne. She'll also do some other things, but then we'll also help her along with like maybe like the pairing or the little things like that. And that's awesome. We like that dialogue from a brand perspective, and we like to kind of inspire, our audience to kind of like partake in something they might have not historically.
And how much, I guess, in that same thing, like the example of JC, like, are you getting that a good amount of like people that have well thought out mini pitches? It's not a big, sending her a couple bottles of champagne is a no-brainer. She's got a huge following. Like, it totally makes sense for you. You guys work with her all the time. She was just in Hawaii with you. But like, someone else, let's say I watch this video and I don't know that you, before this I've never worked with y'all. I've loved the brand. I feel like I'm a good fit. How can they structure that pitch if they don't know you? Like, what works to, how do I get your attention, and like optimize my ability to potentially work with y'all? Right.
I think, and what I'm about to say I don't necessarily know is a blanket or the norm. But, our team, at LaForce and like for Veuve Clicquot, like we really like read every single email that comes across our desk, and we do our best to respond to and give like truly, truly honest feedback. So in that regard, just emailing us is a way to kind of like get our attention and like create that platform for dialogue and communication that way. But I think what's most impressive sometimes is having, kind of like those blown out ideas. Like, here's what I can do for you, or here's an idea that I had. Maybe that idea is 100% on brand, but, if we're excited about it, it's something that we'll work with you on to like make sure that happens, kind of thing. So, it's interesting. We just kind of, like I said, for social media, so much of that, I think, or our success is attributed to kind of like being a luxury brand, but also finding a way to be relatable. I think part of the way that we do that is by partnering with people or like working with, people, digital influencers, content creators, to kind of affect their own twist on a champagne.
Right. Yeah, and I think that a lot of the really successful influencers are the same thing, right? It's like, it's luxury but relatable.
Exactly.
Because the completely unattainable luxury is not as interesting sometimes,
Right, like who wants champagne and caviar when you could have champagne and a hot dog?
Right. I might go for caviar, but then after I'd want a hot dog.
Yeah.
Like maybe I'll just take it all.
Right.
What emails like don't frustrate you a little bit? Like that you wish, if you were like, if I could never get this email again, this would be that email.
It's I love Veuve, but it's spelled incorrectly. I'm serious.
Right.
You wouldn't believe how many times that does happen.
Yeah.
And I understand that it's a French brand, and you can transpose, the vowels there. But
just like take a minute.
Yes. No, that Personally, that's a personal grievance of mine.
Right.
I like love grammar. I think I still have like my high school like AP grammar like spiral notebooks here in New York.
Right.
I'm like such a freak about it. But that
We should have just diagrammed
yeah.
sentences.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I miss.
Yes.
Do you remember diagramming sentences?
And I was
The
walking
gerund
down,
goes into like the little tree.
Yes.
God,
I was like
gerunds.
walking down the street this weekend, and for some reason, iambic pentameter like jumped into my head, and I hadn't thought about iambic pentameter in so long.
Right.
And now I've just
that makes one of us because I think about it every day.
Sorry, I digress.
Do you even know what a gerund is anymore?
Yes,
because
it's the ing.
It's the ing, right?
It's like the action.
Right, and
it's
a participle is
running.
Yeah. And what was the other one? Was it a participle? Anyway, we don't get into grammar conversation, but like gerund, the fact you got gerund, Tim's going to cut this up. You're going to sound awesome.
Okay,
it's going to be
great.
It's going to be great.
I forget what you're asking, but I liked the question.
Emails that you hate.
Oh,
so that one,
yes.
so they misspell Vav, bad idea.
Which is like, I love the champagne, would love to find a way to work with you.
And that's super annoying, right? Because it's like,
Yes.
It then puts it on you. Like, what the fuck are you supposed to say to that email? Okay, I don't know who the hell you are.
Right.
And it's not my job to come up with ways to work with you.
Right, and then sometimes it is, work on us, as a brand person, because you don't want to pass up like the next big thing or, someone who would be an amazing brand partner. But if you have to sit there and then it's sent from the iPhone, you have to like Google this person and then find their Instagram, it's a little discouraging,
right.
If you will.
So we have mentioned on the show before, just like we've talked about the sales process and how like, a relationship is a big part of it.
Yes.
And so for y'all, it's interesting because so many influencers aren't in New York. And we say all the time, like, if you can get coffee or something with, the people in these brands, like that's a good thing. But, revising that and thinking about it, it's probably for a brand like y'all, which, you're not giving product out like crazy, but it's also an easier thing to give out than, a $1,500 jacket that you have to find the sizing for, and you have to see, is this person match our aesthetic in like style and clothes wise? So it is, if you find someone that matches the aesthetic and stuff, it is a little easier to be like, cool, I'll send you a bottle and see what you can do. So do you see that first mini little project you work on as like almost a tryout to see if like I'm gonna have a longer term relationship with you?
Yeah. More often than not. We actually just had someone email us, and she's been emailing us for a while. We've never met, but we have like a very nice dialogue over email. She doesn't live in New York. When she comes in town, we set up a meeting where we tried to. We haven't actually met yet. That moment hasn't happened. But she is redesigning her office. And she's like, I love your brand so much. Like, I would love to just like have my bar cart like all set up with like Veuve Clicquot. So, it's kind of, we also like to surprise people. So like, maybe we'll sit there and think like, okay, let's just like surprise her with some bottles. She's not necessarily asking us for anything. Right. But we're gonna in turn, kind of like reward, like those kinds of occasions, if you will. That's kind of what's exciting for us. We don't want anyone to just drink champagne because it's their birthday or something. Right. We want kind of like those unexpected little moments.
That totally makes sense. And like, again, I think we talked so much on the show about the importance of relationships and keeping those up. And like, I'm sure you're so busy. You're now like, I think just how much you're doing with Veuve, like you're traveling all the time, your attention is stretched pretty thin. So is it those influencers that stay on top of, like, continue to just like reach out and do things, and maybe they go out and buy a bottle every once in a while and post? Are those the ones that like stay top of mind for you?
Yes, and in a lot of ways it's the people who you haven't worked with before that keep in touch. We had someone who we've not been able to execute a partnership with them. Beautiful photographer, but she just sent us photos maybe like 2 hours ago of just herself. She had a weekend in Montauk, and she had our champagne and was like playing around with it, and she just like wanted to share. That is awesome, and that's honestly something that we'll sit with our client tomorrow, our Veuve Clicquot client, and show them. Be like, look what this girl did for us. She's awesome. Let's figure out a way to work with her. That is really cool, and that's kind of like it's almost like a currency for us, if you will. Like we love that so much, to see that.
And how much do you again, we talk all the time about over-delivering, especially when you're starting out and you're trying to build a relationship. And, I think I remember back in the day before we really knew each other, and someone from your team, it wasn't you, but someone who I think worked for you, had reached out and just been like, hey, we'll like comp you a ticket.
Yeah.
And like, love if you posted on Instagram.
Yeah.
It was pretty simple, and I was like, yeah, sure. I took my mom, it's great. And thank God you put me in the VIP tent from then on. Like, I'm not out on the grass anymore.
Stripes.
Yeah, thank God. But, how important in the beginning is that over delivery? I remember I introduced you to one of our influencers, Paula, from Greenville.
Yes.
And she like CC'd me on this email she'd sent you after with a report, and she had like done these whole shoot
Paula
beforehand.
Paula sent me the Montauk photos.
Oh right,
yes.
So like she does a great job. It feels like, and like
yes, she does.
She really like she put a whole report together, and I was like, wow, that's really good, and like really over delivered. And so like. Obviously, you were just talking about her, so it obviously works. But like that stuff works, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we're excited about her, and in that instance, if she doesn't mind being like put on blast, but
I'm sure she'd love it.
We haven't quite found that perfect opportunity to collaborate with her, but she is on our radar. Yeah. In a very big way.
And I think what's important is with Paula, just to use her as an example. I think she's got 40-something thousand followers. It's also like. That is more of an up-and-coming influencer, and you invited her to. I think she was in the Rosé Garden for the
yes, she was.
The Polo Classic, and I think a lot of influencers don't think enough about the long game, especially with a client like Vav that's never going to be a big money maker for any influencers. You really don't pay. I think you in your talk you were like you really.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a step back.
Let's take a step back.
If you think about alcohol. Like that's a pie.
All the time. Yeah, all the time.
If you will. Champagne is like 2% of that pie, like a fraction. And then within that 2%, you have us,
right.
Clico. I mean, we're a big part of that 2%, but that's still so kind of like nominal, like in the grand scheme of things. So that's another challenge we have. And I think, back in the early days, what challenged us to do it right, to be on social and find our voice, to be a part of conversations because we couldn't have paid advertising.
Right.
At that time, social media was the organic tool, and paid posts on Facebook was the alternative. We couldn't be there with every other brand, so we developed an Instagram to give us a voice and a digital persona that we wouldn't have had the opportunity to have elsewhere. Right. And within that, we found ways like the Veuve Clicquot Polo Classic, like the Clicquot Journey Tour, like the Clicquot Destinations, to be able to create content that we not only then share, but do it in a way where our experience is kind of like that currency, just like
being associated with you.
Association. That sounds a little funny to me, but essentially, we are going to give you, if I may be,
please,
the best day party experience you've ever had.
Yeah, I mean, I said, Christmas in July.
The daytime event of the summer season. I think Vogue has said people look forward to it just as much as the Met Gala. That kind of thing. We'll give you that opportunity to come and have the time of your life. We're not going to ask for anything, but then if you create content for us on the back end, that's a win for us as well,
right.
From a brand perspective.
Yeah.
So, we might take you to Ocean House, in Rhode Island, in Westerly, Rhode Island, this beautiful, seaside estate. We aren't able to maybe attach a fee to that experience, but we are giving you, like a weekend getaway.
Right.
And an opportunity to then, create your content, whether it's for yourself, but also, there is some Veuve Clicquot peppered in here and there. And we like that. And
I think what's interesting, and we'll get back to kind of what we were talking about, but there are certain brands that it's just, as an influencer, makes it's a good thing for you to be associated with. Back when I was shooting and I was a photographer, and I was the fact that I was Oscar de la Renta's photographer meant so much. I eventually made some money from Oscar, but not a lot. And in the grand scheme of the money I made as a photographer, a minuscule amount. But I probably would have never gotten any of those other opportunities. And I think there is a validation part of like, if Clicquot is working with you, and you guys are so respected in this space, it's like if you put the stamp of approval on someone, I think a lot of other brands are looking at you. And so it is almost advertising for that influencer to be like, oh, well, they're working with them and they're better at this than we are. So I should just probably reach out to that person and work with them, you know? And I think what I was talking about with Paula earlier was that idea of playing the long game, right? It's like, sure, you haven't worked together in official capacity. She's still growing. She's on the up and up. Maybe not as big as, you know, big enough to like be on one of those experiences yet, but on the radar, you know? And I think that like not enough people, and let me know if you agree, but not enough people think of that long game and think like, if I'm gonna do this for years, then like, if I'm at 40K now and I can make Clicquot happy and I can do things for them and I can just send them photos and shoot stuff and come up with fun ideas and get to go to the Palo Classic every year and maybe they send me a couple bottles at Christmas or something, you know. But in a year and a half, when I'm at 175K, then they're like, okay, now we feel like we're gonna invite you to Deer Valley, or we're gonna do this thing, or we're gonna go to Rhode Island together. Like, that is a lot of times how it works, right? If those people who have been loyal to you. Have you found that in your career?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, we do invest in, we like to say content creators. You know, sometimes it's a little flimsy, you know, are they a blogger, are they a digital influencer, are they a photographer, you know, yada, yada, yada. We like to say we invest in content, and by virtue of the people that are creating that content. So we are looking to see like what stories people are telling, you know, what they're creating like visually, how they're styling, and we watch and follow along, you know. I think a lot of the people we surround ourselves with and kind of like our more intimate, you know, family of you know, Clicquot evangelists are people that we've been nurturing and building relationships with for the past, you know, 4 or 5 years.
Right,
you know,
or more maybe.
Yeah, or more.
Because actually, I'm going to revise the statement and say, like, when I was like, oh, I first became familiar with you, with the product, I actually think it was Tumblr, and it was Jamie Beck.
Yeah,
and that was one of the first times I remember a brand sending a blogger.
Yes.
At this point, I don't think we called them bloggers, but a Tumblr kid.
It was
and like Jamie got a cake. Like Jamie always had Clicquot. Like you guys just like made sure she had it, and she had all this beautiful content. I was like, oh, what is it? I don't think I'd ever heard of it before. And so it's interesting now to remember that like I actually did become associated with the brand through social and through that early, very, very early work.
Yes, I mean, that was such an interesting time, I think, for brands on social media. This was like 2011, 2012. I wasn't quite here in New York yet, but I remember just kind of looking at people like Erica Behrman, who, you know, you worked with Oscar de la Renta.
Made me the person I am.
Yeah. And sitting there and thinking from like my apartment in the West Campus in Austin, Texas, being like, I'm going to be the next Oscar PR girl. Like seriously, this was like a thought I had in my head.
Right.
Like I had no, like again, PR girl, that was like the dream. Now I tweet, but no, but that was the dream and that was the goal, because it was so awesome to see people like Erica or like an Eliza Licht, you know, from DKNY PR girl, sit there and humanize a brand.
Right.
I mean, shoot, in college, I don't even know, I mean, Oscar de la Renta, I was thinking about like Steve Madden, you know, just in terms of like, you know, what's in front of you and what's most relevant to you, but to be able to bring kind of like the highest of the high, you know, down to the level of someone who's, you know, 21, it's pretty incredible. It is,
and you know, I think no greater, like I use you all as an example of how powerful what these influencers do is, because Clicquot is so ubiquitous amongst I'm 33, you know, my friends are all decently well-to-do at this point. They're all getting a little older, a little more successful. You know, you come over, they're not drinking, you know, vodka out of plastic bottles anymore.
Right.
And Clicquot is so universal. Thank God. Is so universal in like the champagne that people serve, and I think it is because like you speak their language, but also you're just fucking everywhere, you know, and it's constant, and you like one of the few brands that have been able to act almost as an influencer.
We like to think of ourselves as kind of like a person.
Right.
It's so funny. you know, every brand, or I would say most brands, have kind of like this mission statement. It's internal. I think in the past couple of years, it's gone from like being the ringleader to like also being like a part, you know, of the group, essentially. So, you know, you might be having a dinner party Friday night in, you know, Veuve Clicquot does that too, kind of thing.
Right,
you know?
right.
Whereas, you know, maybe a couple of years ago, it was the C&B scene, you know.
Right, it was like, all like, celebration and...
Right, so our task, our goal, you know, the wins for us are finding kind of like these consumption scenarios, right, that any one person would be experiencing that maybe you would not think to have champagne with, right? If you're at home playing bananagrams with your girlfriends, you know, why don't you try it with Veuve Clicquot Rosé kind of thing?
Why not?
Why not?
Exactly. I can't see a reason.
Right? Am I right?
You are. Yeah, I mean, I think this goes back a bit to what we were saying. Like, I was thinking about you, and, you know, I get emails all the time from influencers that want to work more with Fohr Card, which I totally appreciate, but they don't give me a lot of context, and it's like, tell me how I can work more with you guys. And I'm a bit like, you know, like, what am I supposed to say to that?
Exactly.
And we talked about it a little bit earlier before, but it was interesting because you were like, it's good to have a very clear idea. But then I was wondering if it puts you in an awkward position if somebody who is a little smaller following emails you and is like, hey, I'd like to be in the VIP section for, you know, the Clicquot Classic. Does that put you in a weird position of having to like disappoint them and be like, oh, we can't put you there, we could put you in the Rosé Garden? So like, would you prefer for them to come out and be like, this is exactly what I want? Or, I love you guys, I'd love to attend, let me know where it makes sense, here's what I think I could give you. Like, what kind of...
That's an interesting question, because, you know, I can speak directly to a scenario with Veuve Clicquot just because, you know, you use that as one. But in the event where someone is, for instance, coming to a brand for access to the event, there's this idea that in providing access, no matter at what level, that brand is also being very flexible for you. You know, because, you know, just to be quite honest, like, you know, you probably weren't on their radar before.
Right.
And you probably weren't on their initial
you're reaching
allocation
out.
of tickets,
Yeah.
right? So
good point.
It's kind of like this interesting idea because, you know, someone might be very, you know, maybe crestfallen, right? When maybe they don't have VIP access, right? But sometimes if it's our first time interacting with you, you know, like, we are making an exception already for you to...
That's a really good point. That's
a
really good point.
To join us in our event experience, maybe when we wouldn't have kind of thought about you otherwise. But therein lies an opportunity, you know, to show us what you got, you know, and kind of like make your mark, if
because
you will.
it is such in y'all's case, it is such a popular event that giving a spot to someone probably eventually means not giving a spot to someone else.
Exactly.
And I've asked you, I always ask you for extra, hey, my mom wants to come, this person wants to come, you know, and it's like, I'll see. You know, I mean, we've worked together for years, and you know, I know you guys use Fohr Card to help build this event, and it's hard because like there isn't a lot of spots, and I think that's a really good point of like, you're asking someone for something, in any way that they acquiesce that request, they are kind of making an exception for you, but yeah, do you get a bad taste in your mouth if you feel like they asked for too much? Or are you like, hey, props for you for asking, we can't do that, but here's what we can do?
Yeah, you know, I think we understand it, you know, and we take the time to maybe explain the situation. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, we want to give someone the best and most premium experience with our brand as possible, you know. So we work hard to do that, you know, and we do what we can. And I think it is hard from someone as nice as me.
You're so nice.
I'm so
You're
nice.
so nice.
So nice. To say no. I mean, like, no is hard, but you know, sometimes you got to do it, and but that doesn't mean that the door is always closed, and that there is not going to be an opportunity or a future for collaboration or partnership. You know, it's just kind of like a right now thing.
And if I'm optimizing, again, we talk all the time about like when you email a brand, send them past coverage of that brand.
Yes.
So like if I'm optimizing my chances of working with you in any capacity, is it super helpful to be like, hey, I love the brand. For example, here's 2 posts that I've done organically for you over the past year.
Right. Yeah, that's helpful, but also just seeing past like relevant work.
So like anything that's like
Veuve Clicquot champagne for I don't know, lemonade or something.
Right.
We it's kind of like that social media digital team. Like we are essentially content producers, and we like to think of ourselves as pretty creative. And if we can't see beyond like the wrapping on a bottle, to understand what someone's capable of doing, we're not very good at our job.
Right. So they don't necessarily have to send like Veuve coverage, but they could say, hey, here's something I did for Stella, or here's a cookout I had.
Yes.
That,
and here's just a sample of like what I could do.
I do these dinner parties.
Yes. Like,
should they send other champagne or no?
We don't love to see it. Honestly, that is something we look at. I'm not going to lie. If someone emails us and is like, hey, I would love to work with you, it's been my dream. And then you get on their feed and maybe they're posting about like a sparkling wine or like a competing champagne like the day before.
It's tough.
It's tough.
Yeah.
Right? Because then you can't help but kind of like think that, But yeah, it is something that we notice and that we pay attention to.
And over the last 4 or 5 years of doing this, just any general tips? Again, a lot of the influencers that watch this, they're on the up and up. They're not, they want to be the JCs and Olivias and Blair Edie's. They're not there yet, Any general tips of things that you've seen work really well in your years of experience? Yeah,
I think you might have said it earlier. I don't know exactly what word you used, but it's kind of like find your like point of view or like your aesthetic. And you just named like JC and Olivia and Blair, and then Olivia is going to like she is escapism. She's kind of like that exotic feel. As a brand, when you're looking at people to align with and collaborate with, you want to find people who are on brand for you, who are like-minded and share things in common. But also, I want as many vantage points or viewpoints as possible. We love to find someone who's, maybe in Nashville, that's creating content just as amazingly as someone who's in Los Angeles. Right. And we're just as likely to work with them, regardless of their location, just because they're creating like really compelling, engaging content.
Right.
So, but I think like finding that point of view is important because, more and more every single day we're making decisions based on what a newsfeed looks like. And that's just really kind of the hard truth. Back in the day we'd send a brief to our client on people we wanted to collaborate with and we were linking to the blog. And now we're linking to the Instagram. Right. And while you can, look past a follower account, it could be 40,000, it could be 400,000. What's important to us is kind of like the look and feel of that newsfeed and having an aesthetic that's like present throughout. Right. The kind of cohesiveness is really important to us. It's like you are kind of like an editorial publication in a sense, right? And the goal is to make us as a brand want to be featured. Right. Right.
And maybe I think what you said that was really interesting was the idea that you're more than just yourself. You're more than just me, right? It's how do you see the world, right. And I think, for you, those of you that don't follow Jamie from Ann Street Studio, we've mentioned 50 times it seems like, but she does such an amazing job of just, the world is a little more lovely when you see it through her lens. Yes. Literally. But like having that ability to filter, Blair Edie does a great job as well. Like the world looks different when you see it through her eyes because she has a very unique point of view that extends beyond just these are my outfits, this is the clothes I wear.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for everything, for the insights, for the champagne, for the correct glasses. Also important to know that Veuve prefers not to serve out of champagne flutes generally, right?
Yes. So the wider the glass, like the opening of the glass, it's more expression of the bubbles in the champagne.
Well, cheers to that. Cheers to that. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
I'm not going to give anyone your email address because that'll be the end of your life, but if you're industrious. You will find her. You will pitch her good things. You will make her life easier. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Cheers.
Yes. Cheers.